Hey artists, in this video we're going to talk all about getting started with clay and how to get set up correctly as well as how to get cleaned up correctly at the end of our class time. So first of all, you want to put on an apron and then you want to remove any rings, any bracelets, watches, jewelry. You want to push your sleeves up, and then at your tables you're going to get set up with one of these canvas covered clay boards. So set the clay board down. And then you can have your plans, your photo reference in these plastic sleeves to protect them from all the mess, as well as at each table in the middle, you'll have a bucket of water and some sponges inside. So step one is we want to keep a nice damp area on this board to work with our clay. And so squeezing out the sponge so it's not fully wet but just damp, you can create a nice working area using that sponge. So you don't have to get right to all the corners, but definitely sort of in the center area. Go back into the bucket as needed with that guy. Okay, this can help sometimes to keep your hands slightly damp as well as you handle the clay. The clay itself wants to stay wet. And so you don't want to kind of let this color change too much. If it's drying out as you're working, you can come back in, get more water. So as you look at your block of clay, the first process we're going to talk about is reductive sculpture. So if you're trying to plan, like with my little standing squirrel here, which I think is what I'll do, I want to imagine that this is trapped inside this piece of clay. Okay, so I can look at it standing up this way, top down. Where would things be? You know, think about a side view, front view, and so on. You can see that the clay is quite soft and easy to manipulate at this early stage. So we're not going to try to get lots of little details, but we're going to just try to get the basic forms. Clay is all about three-dimensional form. So there's a few tools that you might use as you begin this step. I'll just put the clay to the side so I can quickly talk through these tools. So some of the tools that you've already seen, we have the sponge. We also have water bottles where you can spray your clay, keep things damp, just not jets of water, but nice misting. So the sponges and the water bottles are handy for that. And then we also have rolling pins to share, and then a variety of tools, starting with a couple of different knives. So there's this metal knife and a wooden knife. I'm going to use these largely in the early stages of blocking out. I'll just finish talking through the rest of the tools for a moment. You also have a couple of carving or hollowing tools. You can see how some have narrower parts and some have sort of larger parts. These can be used gliding along the clay or scooping it out. You have a fine detailing tool. These we'll use a lot later in the project, getting into small areas where your fingers or fingernails can't quite do the work. We also have a pin tool. This is a really great tool for poking some air holes into your sculpture so that it won't explode once it's in the kiln being fired. It's also great for scratching, creating textures, drawing lines, and scratch and attach, which is a technique I'll quickly show in this video. We also have a scratching tool just for that exact purpose. It kind of looks like a little rake or a broom. And then we have three types of kidney tools, sort of the shape of our kidneys. A rounded edge, most of them have a flat edge, whether they're made out of wood, plastic, or flexible metal. These are great for kind of smoothing your clay out. Okay, so you might see me grab a few of these tools as I get through this early stage. Now, in the early stage of working on your clay, you can think about two ways to approach this. And the first one is reductive. So reductive sculpture is, like I was saying earlier, you can imagine that your sculptural subject is trapped inside this block of clay. And so looking at your reference will really help you with this. But I might just want to imagine, this is kind of the wider side of it, using the full height here where I don't really need as much clay. So where's this guy's sort of head, body comes in, but we're gonna keep the base or the feet really wide. The tail sort of feel, ears might come up, but we'll have a lost section here. So you can see I've like almost roughed out that feeling of my squirrel. And then I can start to just cut right in, okay, and pull away areas of clay that I don't think I'm going to need. So I find that the wooden knives work perfectly well for this step. If you're having trouble, you might grab a metal knife instead to just kind of keep blocking out. Now it's important that you don't only stay in this one view that I have. As I'm blocking out, okay, I also need to think about the other sides and also the various depths. So this body is coming more forward than this tail. So I actually am going to flip him this way now. And I know that the tail is kind of from this view making this sort of a shape, okay, just roughly. But I also know that it's more set back from the front of the squirrel. So I'm going to take that sort of finger width just a little bit at a time, and I'm going to kind of keep pulling that away. So as I'm building and assessing this blocking out, you can see how a form is kind of starting to emerge. Like right here, we have a shoulder that's beginning. Here, I could keep cutting away this whole from the top view, right? Where's the head going to be? Again, I like sort of drawing with the knife. You could draw with the pin tool if it would help you to see better. So we're trying to keep this block of clay as solid as possible and just removing what we don't think we're going to need in the areas that it's not going to be there. So right now from this top view, I know it doesn't look like much, but I've got the head. I've got this sort of gap or space between the head and the tail that's slightly lower. And I can even start to push without separating it, but just moving, squeezing, and generally starting to block out those forms, okay, within my sculpture. So you can imagine there's lots of little pieces of clay that start to happen as I build these basic shapes. What you want to do with all of these is don't leave them everywhere to dry out. I can even see, as I've been working, that my board has started to dry out. So it's a great idea to keep going back to your spray bottle, keep your fingers damp, or I prefer, honestly, my sponge. Keep your fingers wet. You can pick up the thing that you're blocking out, okay? Keep the base or the surface wet. That's really important. And I'll just put him here because we also want to keep all of our scrap bits together, okay? So you're blocking out, trying to minimize air and get that basic form started, but you don't want to waste this good clay. So one other technique to know as you're working on blocking out is a technique called wedging. So in this technique, nice damp area, you can ball all those pieces of clay together. Sometimes it can help to roll it out. I like to just kind of slap it between my hands like so. And then the technique for wedging is a bit like kneading bread dough. So if you've ever done that before, this will feel really familiar to you. It's a press down. So you kind of create this little divot. It makes me think of like a little animal face. And then with your fingers curling beneath, you're gonna roll it back. Press and roll, press and roll. And you're just gonna continue doing that as you squish out any excess air bubbles. It kind of starts to create like a little bit of a burrito type shape or like a jelly roll. And if I cut this clay crossways, I would see that perfect spiral of having pushed those air bubbles out. You can give it another good slap or two. And this is a great technique sometimes for building specific forms that you might want to add to your clay. So that brings me to the second approach in early stages, and that is additive. So let's say I've worked on the head. I'll just pretend this is my squirrel's head that is on the block. So I'll get us a nice round shape here. And then let's say, oh, I want to at least build in like some simple ears, triangular ears. So for that, I might choose to flatten out my clay. Could use the rolling pin to assist me with that, or you could use the slab roller that we have at the back of the class. Again, I am looking at my reference to kind of know, looking at the head shape or scale, so that if I draw a slightly oversized ear, let's just say, okay, I'm going to be able to attach it using a scratch and attach technique. So in reductive, we talk about blocking out. And now that I'm doing additive, okay, I want to scratch and attach. Before I do that, because he's got two ears, I'm actually just going to place this again, trace it out. That way I have two identical shapes to kind of work with. Okay, and again, keeping any extra clay together, keeping your area damp as you work. Okay, so now I sort of have a couple of ear shapes. I might actually put that slight curve to them in this early stage, even though the clay is soft. So I'm a bit limited in how I can do that, but just using my fingers as tools, or you could even use, you know, the back end of a knife. I quite like that as a tool. Okay, that's starting to feel more like an ear to me. And then let's say I want to attach it. So try to let these firm up slightly before you do this technique, but you always want to scratch. So I'm doing some nice deep score lines. You might even do those in a couple of directions. And then wherever I want to attach it here on the face, I want to do the same, or sorry, on the head. So I'm scratching one element, okay? I'm scratching the other element, so both pieces where they're connecting are scratched. And then at your tables, you're also gonna have these slip buckets. It's just like a watery sort of glue. I'm gonna get my finger into that slip, going to fill those cracks with the wet mud-like clay. That's the scratch, and then the slip and some good pressure, okay, is going to help me attach. It's really important that you scratch and attach if you are ever adding things together, okay? Because if we don't scratch and attach with the slip and the tools, it's very likely, like this ear, for example, if I just plunked it on there and I thought, yep, that's sticking really well, it might do so for a little while. When it goes into the kiln and it's fired, it might pop off, crack, or break. And so we just want to keep things in this stage of the project, okay, as solid and together as possible. So you want to imagine that this type of work, the scratching and attaching, can happen, but we mostly want to keep all of our sculptures in as solid of a block as possible with any extra clay balled up, kneaded out, okay, wedged and off to the side. So this process is going to take a little while to get things looking how you like. At the end of each class, you're going to take a bag, plastic bag, wrap your sculpture completely. Same thing with any extra clay, just wrap it up and set that off near the windows to hang out. And then the slip bucket and your clay boards and all the tools that you used, these all have to be cleaned really, really well to keep the dust down. So the last steps usually in a class day is going to involve everyone using their bucket of water in the middle. Be careful because some of these tools are pointy, but I like to just toss them all in and then one at a time kind of run the sponge. It's like you're doing the dishes at home, right? Run that sponge on each and every tool. It's really making sure to get any clay bits off of those, especially these ones. They can be really tricky to clean. So you're gonna clean them all up. It's okay if they're wet. These all go back in the appropriate buckets by size and by type, okay? And then the final thing is gonna be taking the sponge that you used to start, taking it to your board, and this time getting the board quite wet at first, okay? And then really scrubbing and pulling up any little bits of clay. If you've got quite a bit of clay that's stuck to your board, you could drag a tool across it, okay? Kidney tool, knife, whatever. I have some scrapers as well. We just want to get those boards as clean as possible and then stack them back up. So in those early stages, remember, you want to look at your reference, go slowly. You might choose reductive, so taking away, blocking out, or you might choose additive, where you scratch and attach. But in any case, the clay is really soft and pliable, so we want to get our sizes right, we want to get it all sorted out and build slowly till we get to a new step of the process. Good luck and have fun.